Chief Maquinna was a very important leader of the Moachot people. The Moachot are part of the larger Nucha nation. They lived on the west coast of what we now call Vancouver Island. Their main village was Yuquot, which means wind comes from all directions. This village was located in a sheltered cove called Nootka Sound. Maquinna was not just any chief. He was a powerful and respected leader. He held a high-ranking position that was passed down through his family. His role was to take care of his people, manage their resources, and lead them in ceremonies and important decisions. He was known for his intelligence and his ability to see the bigger picture. The life of the Moachot people was deeply connected to the land and the sea. They were skilled whalers, fishers, and traders. Their culture was rich with traditions, songs, and art. Large cedar longhouses provided homes for many families, and magnificent totem poles told the stories of their ancestors. Chief Maquinna was the guardian of these traditions. He was responsible for making sure that his community thrived. He managed the trade relationships with neighboring First Nations, exchanging goods like sea otter pelts, whale oil, and beautifully crafted canoes. His leadership ensured that the Moachot people maintained their powerful position along the coast long before Europeans arrived. Maquinna's name itself is a title, not just a personal name. It means possessor of pebbles and signifies his high rank. The person holding the title of Maquinna was the highest-ranking chief among the Moachot. He hosted great feasts called potlatches, where he would give away wealth to his guests to show his power and generosity. These events were central to their society. They reinforced social structures and distributed resources throughout the community. Through these important cultural practices, Maquinna maintained his authority and the well-being of his people. He was a skilled diplomat and a strong leader, prepared for the challenges that would soon arrive from across the ocean. Being the leader of Yuquot, it gave Maquinna a unique position of power. Nootka Sound was a strategic location. It was a safe harbor for ships and a central point for coastal trade routes. Whoever controlled Yuquot controlled access to valuable resources. Maquinna understood this very well. He knew the importance of his village and the territory his people had occupied for thousands of years. This deep understanding of his home and his role as a leader would become incredibly important when strange ships with tall sails appeared on the horizon. His world, and the world of his people, was about to change forever, and he would be the one to guide them through it. In 1778, a new and unfamiliar sight appeared in Nootka Sound. 3 large ships, led by the famous British explorer Captain James Cook, sailed into the calm waters of Yuquot. This was one of the first major encounters between the Nucha people and Europeans. Chief Maquinna, as the leader, managed this first contact with great skill. He greeted the visitors not with hostility, but with curiosity and a desire to trade. He and his people offered sea otter pelts in exchange for metal goods like iron chisels and copper sheets. Cook was impressed by their confidence and their eagerness to do business. This meeting opened the door to a new era of trade on the coast. The sea otter pelts that Maquinna traded were incredibly valuable. When Cook's crew later sold the furs in China, they made a huge profit. News of this valuable resource spread quickly across Europe and North America. Soon, many more ships began to arrive in Nootka Sound, all wanting to trade for the luxurious soft gold. Maquinna became the most important indigenous figure in this new global trade network. He controlled the supply of pelts and skillfully negotiated with the visiting captains. He used this powerful position to increase his own wealth and the influence of his people, the Moachot, along the coast. Years later, another important British explorer, Captain George Vancouver, arrived in Nootka Sound in 1792. By this time, Maquinna was an experienced diplomat who had dealt with many different traders from Britain, Spain, and the United States. His relationship with Vancouver was complex. They spent a lot of time together, sharing meals and discussing the politics of the region. Vancouver wrote in his journals about Maquinna's intelligence and dignity. Maquinna, in turn, used these interactions to learn more about the Europeans and their intentions. He was not a passive observer, he was an active participant, shaping the conversations and alliances that were forming on his territory. These early interactions were not always peaceful or easy. There were misunderstandings and moments of tension. The Europeans brought new diseases that devastated indigenous populations, and some traders were dishonest or violent. Maquinna had to navigate these dangers carefully. He had to protect his people while also taking advantage of the new opportunities that trade presented. His leadership during this period was crucial. He established the rules of engagement and showed other leaders how to interact with the newcomers. He put himself and his people at the center of a new world, a world where continents were now connected by the desire for trade. The Nootka Crisis was a major international conflict that put Chief Maquinna and his people at the very center of a global power struggle. In 1789, Spain, which claimed the entire Pacific coast of North America, decided to establish a settlement at Yuquat to assert its control. The Spanish commander, Esteban José Martínez, seized several British trading ships and built a fort called Fort San Miguel. This act nearly brought Britain and Spain to war. Suddenly, Maquinna's home was a flashpoint between two of the world's most powerful empires. He was no longer just dealing with individual traders. He was now caught between two nations fighting for his land. Maquinna had to be a very clever diplomat to survive this situation. He had to manage his relationships with both the Spanish and the British. At first, he seemed to form a friendly relationship with Martínez and the Spanish. However, this relationship soured after a tragic incident where a Moachot chief was killed by a Spanish sailor. This event caused a deep rift between the Moachot and the Spanish occupiers. Maquinna withdrew his people from Yuquat for a time, showing the Spanish that their presence depended on his goodwill. He demonstrated that he was the true authority in Nootka Sound, not the foreign commanders. When British and Spanish diplomats arrived to negotiate a settlement, Maquinna played a key role. George Vancouver for the British and Juan Francisco de la Bodega y Cuadra for the Spanish both sought his support. Maquinna met with both leaders, shared his knowledge of the territory, and explained his own people's rights to the land. He hosted them with great ceremony, reinforcing his status as the rightful leader of the region. He made it clear to both Vancouver and Quadra that the land they were arguing over belonged to the Moachot. His testimony was important because it challenged the European idea that they could simply claim land that was already home to indigenous people. In the end, the Nootka Conventions were signed in Europe, and Spain agreed to withdraw from Nootka Sound, leaving the area open to traders from all nations. While the decision was made thousands of miles away, Maquinna's actions on the ground had a significant impact. He had successfully navigated a dangerous international crisis. He had protected his people from being completely overrun by either empire. His leadership showed that indigenous leaders were not just passive victims of colonization. They were active political figures who could influence the course of history, even when faced with the immense power of European empires. Chief Maquinna's leadership had a lasting impact that helped shape the future of what would become British Columbia. By engaging in trade and diplomacy, he established a model for how First Nations could interact with Europeans. He insisted on being treated as an equal and made it clear that the land and its resources belonged to his people. This set an important precedent for future land rights discussions and treaties in the region. He was not simply a trader, he was a political leader who defended his people's sovereignty. His actions ensured that the Nuu-chah-nulth and other coastal nations were seen as key players in the development of the Pacific Northwest. The trade relationships that Maquinna pioneered transformed the economy of the coast. While the fur trade brought new wealth and goods, it also brought profound changes to the culture. Metal tools made carving and building easier, but the focus on trading for European goods also shifted traditional economic patterns. Maquinna managed these changes by incorporating new wealth into traditional practices like the potlatch. He used the profits from the fur trade to enhance his status and the status of his people through these important ceremonies. In this way, he guided his community through a period of rapid cultural change, blending old traditions with new realities. However, the legacy is also complex and includes difficult truths. The increased contact with Europeans led to the spread of devastating diseases like smallpox, which dramatically reduced the indigenous population along the coast. The sea otter population was also hunted nearly to extinction, ending the era of the maritime fur trade that had brought Maquinna so much influence. By the time Maquinna passed away around 1795, the world he was born into had been changed forever. His successors had to lead their people through the even greater challenges of colonization and settlement that followed in the 19th century. Today, Chief Maquinna is remembered as a powerful and visionary leader. He is a symbol of indigenous resilience and skillful diplomacy. His story is an essential part of the history of British Columbia, reminding us that the province's origins were shaped not just by European explorers, but by strong indigenous leaders who defended their land, their culture, and their people. The Moachot-Machalat First Nation continues to honor his legacy, and Yuquote, his home village, is recognized as a National Historic Site of Canada. Maquinna's life shows us a history of encounter and negotiation, a story of a leader who stood firm between two worlds.